2048 will be the year that Israel has trade relations with all of its neighbors. It's the year that the Palestinians start being Palestinian and having their identity based on being who they are, rather than being against Israel and being against Jews. It's the year where Israel is able to have not just regional peace, but a regional balance of power, which is respected not by just all those in the Middle East, but all those throughout the rest of the world.
So it does look like this goal of total victory in Gaza, some would say, is impossible because of this catch-22. You can bomb the hell out of Hamas, but until you find someone who is going to govern Gaza instead, there is no way to sustainably defeat Hamas, or as the Americans are calling it, the enduring defeat of Hamas. This analogy will be unfamiliar to most of our viewers, and to me as well, I have to admit.
Sure. So for the better part of 40 years, the LTTE, or the Tamil Tigers organization in Sri Lanka, which represented the Tamil minority in the country, in Colombo and in the south of Sri Lanka, waged a 40-year campaign against the Sinhalese majority government that was there, until there was a Sri Lankan prime minister who, very much like Prime Minister Netanyahu in this case against Hamas, said, "We will no longer stand for Tamil terror." And this is a group that engaged in suicide bombings, had its own navy, had its own rocket forces, was willing to embed itself in the civilian population of Sri Lanka to blow up buses and infrastructure, very much a copycat of a different conflict like Hamas, but in Sri Lanka. And when the Sri Lankan government and the Sinhalese majority military decided to wage a victory campaign, a campaign for total victory against the Tamil Tigers, they, day by day, week by week, year by year, were able to slowly consolidate the amount of territory that the Tamil Tigers had control over, until the head of the Tamil Tigers, very much the Achach Sinwar of the Tamil Tigers, was stuck on a small peninsula and was literally the organization bombed out of existence.
So I want them singing Jerusalem every morning either.
But we could find a viable alternative to that in Gaza. I just think that the Israelis have to get creative, and I think they have to stand and put a line in the sand to their allies saying, we will not accept UNRWA to operate here anymore. I think, going back to earlier in the conversation, that Israel had a de facto recognition of a Palestinian state in Gaza when Israeli soldiers and civilians left there in August and November of 2005. And the policy for the Sharon government and the Olmert government, if I had been in their shoes 20 years ago, would have been to have recognized not the state of Palestine, but the state of Gaza, and allow them.
You can't recognize a state that hasn't declared itself.
Well, there's always something new in international form, so maybe I'm reinventing something here which doesn't exist in international law, but to treat them as a state, to treat them for all intensive purposes of recognizing they have a military control of their borders, being able to govern, being able to have their own institutions, being able to make their own policy decisions.
Okay, but what does this mean for the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria?
I'm getting there, to the Palestinians in the West Bank. I think that Israel eventually will have to recognize a Palestinian state in Gaza, or a state of Gaza which consists of Palestinians. As it relates to the West Bank, I think that if the major Palestinian urban centers, whether it be Tulkarm and Jenin in the north, all the way down to Hebron and Jericho in the south, with Ramallah and Abu Dis and Qalqilia and the other entities in the middle, are able to renounce terrorism, meaning that they no longer think that it's a viable path for them to obtain independence by killing Jews, or by preaching the killing of Jews, or by an international fora trying to get Israel declared as a state non grata. If they're willing to do that, then I think it's in Israeli policymakers' interests to offer recognition of some kind of Palestinian polity, whether you call it a state, whether you call it a confederation. It's up for the Israelis to decide how they'll define that. But they have to understand that the carrot at the end of the road to rejecting rejectionism is them being able to govern themselves.